Good morning, everybody. Tēnā tātou katoa. We seek wisdom, understanding, insights into the views and circumstances of others, strength to seek what we believe in, humility to accept the combined decisions of others, patience, good humour at all times, tolerance and courtesy, while working in the best interests of our community. We begin with apologies. The first apology is from the Mayor for lateness, and he's apologising on behalf of his colleagues Sharon Stewart and Paul. Paul's here already. Well, Councillor Young, you must have sped. We've been at the opening of the Ormiston Town Centre, so thank you very much for my colleagues for being there and the full Howick board. But unfortunately, we weren't able to get away more quickly than we were able to. I have also apologies for early departure from Councillor Josephine Bartley and Councillor Efesor Collins. Are there any other apologies? Shane Henderson, I saw driving into the basement just before me.
He's electronic.
Oh, he's on. Oh, actually, yeah. So you beat me across here. You must have sprinted. No other apologies. So I'll move that we accept those apologies. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Walker. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. Electronic attendance. No requests have been received.
We've got one.
We have now. We now have Councillor Philippina. Good morning, Alf. So move that we approve Councillor Philippina's attendance by and seconded by Councillor Efesor Collins. I'll move that way. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. Declaration of interest. Are there any councillors today that have any interest they need to declare in terms of our agenda? If not, we've got the confirmation of minutes of the 25th of February and the 11th of March extraordinary meeting, all 3.5 minutes of it. So I'll ask for somebody to move that way. Councillor Henderson, seconded Councillor Desley Simpson. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. We have no petitions. We have no requests for public input today, nor local board input. And I have not been advised of any extraordinary items by councillors. So we come to item number 9 on our agenda, which is our advice on the next steps for Freedom Camping and Vehicles bylaw. So if I can ask Rebecca Foreman and Kataraina Maki to come forward, please. I'm going to ask Councillor Linda Cooper to move the recommendations. Councillor Cooper, we've got a seconder for that. Yep, Councillor Deputy Mayor Bill Cashmore. And councillors will recall that we had a workshop on this recently where we focused on the fact that there have been changes in the Reserves Act, which means we now have infringement fines under the Reserves Act, and we no longer need to include that within the Freedom Camping rules. And we were given advice on what the statute currently allows us to do, and advice therefore on the what we might like to include and exclude in terms of the applicability of this bylaw. But I think maybe if I could invite Councillor Linda Cooper maybe to introduce the item and then come to council
Certainly,
officers.
You've probably said most of it, but basically we did a lot of work over several years. We deferred this work to be re-looked at and sent away. There were 10 resolutions from our meeting in 2019, and the staff have gone away to look at them and see what's feasible, what's in, what's out, what is doable. And as we've had some changes to the Reserves Act around being able to give infringement notices, that gives us some better options. So I think really what we're looking for here is to look for an option to go ahead, and then also have, we didn't have a general rule. That was part of the sticking point in the last proposal for a small group to go away comprised of half local board and half councillors to look at developing a general rule alongside our staff that's legal and practical, and come back and then bring back the whole statement of proposal to go out to public consultation. So I'll hand it over to our very capable staff.
Thank you, Rebecca. You're leading on this one?
Kia ora koutou katoa. So I think probably most of the points have actually been covered by the introductions by the Mayor and Councillor Cooper. So probably the only other thing to really bring to your attention is that we have remained in touch with central government during this process, and paragraphs 121 and 122 reflect the formal advice that we had had at the time of going to print. However, MB has just the day before yesterday confirmed that the Tourism Minister intends to release a discussion document next week containing proposals for changes to the Freedom Camping Act 2011. If that document is approved by Cabinet on Monday, as expected, we will receive it on Tuesday. MB advises that it intends to hold a public meeting in Auckland on the 6th of April to hear from Aucklanders as part of 4 weeks of national public consultation on those changes during April. We don't yet know what those proposals are, but we don't anticipate that the changes will fundamentally alter the permissive intent of the Act. It's probably more likely to be around self-containment and also around enforcement. However, we will, of course, be looking at those with interest when they come on Tuesday. The Council can, of course, make a submission as part of that process as well. We can take any changes to the Freedom Camping Act that are signalled following the consultation period into a new statement of proposal. So in that sense, the timing does allow us to take account of anything that is coming out of government at this time. So that's probably the only other thing to add to what's already been said. I'd also mention that we do have staff with us from licensing and compliance and also from public law. So my General Manager, Katarana Maki, and myself are happy to take your questions, and we also have those other staff in support. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Yeah, it was probably a year ago we would have really strongly welcomed the fact that the government was re-examining the Freedom Camping Act, just when we've figured that we'd worked a way to go through it. They have now acknowledged that they want to look at 1 or 2 factors, but I think we should just move ahead with this paper as planned, and we will be coming back, obviously, for the next iteration of it. And if there are any substantive changes, firstly, we'll advise councillors, but we can then build that into whatever later paper we might confirm. In relation to our recommendations, I'll just get somebody to move that. Linda Cooper to move.
But just to note, you and I have both talked to some councillors to see whether they might want to be on this working group, and my suggestion, if it's okay to do this now.
Yeah, I've also asked for expressions of interest from various people, and yourself, obviously, as the chair of the Regulatory Committee, the chair of our Finance Committee, Desley Simpson, and I think Angela, you've indicated an interest in this as well, and that would give us good representation from the west, the centre east and the south, but it's still open, obviously, if other people wish to put their name forward.
I think also we've got 3 local board members, and I'm sure there'll be really strong interest from the Albany ward in terms of that, so hopefully the local boards will send people from that area.
With a nod to our colleagues from the north, we hope to get some further geographic balance from the local board. So it will be a 3-3-1 with a representative from the Independent Māori Statutory Board. I haven't yet been advised of their nomination yet. So Linda, you'll move these recommendations. Have I got a seconder? Yep. A question. Okay, let's move into questions.
Sorry, it's been moved and seconded, so I was just going to ask. The bit that is a bit interesting, isn't it, about what the government are planning to do, because we don't know what that is. I just wondered, Your Worship, what sort of message, if I'm not mistaken, did you say that they were going to hold a public meeting in Auckland? With respect, one meeting in Auckland could be absolutely humongous. So, with respect, I wondered, Your Worship, if the mover and seconder would entertain the thought of a resolution or a message to the government that maybe they may need more than one at 4, i.e. north, south, east and west or something. I don't know what they're going to... If they say nothing, basically, and nothing much, that's fine. But this is a pretty hot topic, and Auckland's a big place. I think just to think that can have one public meeting is a little bit, insert polite word.
Yeah, no, understood. I haven't been given the details of how they want to go about or what indeed they're contemplating consulting on. We've only just got that the information that that they will be further consulting on it. I think, Rebecca, you said you thought it was about the requirement to be self-contained. So it may not dramatically influence the nature of the Act. And we will ask questions about what the form of consultation, what form the consultation will take, if it is to be significant changes or there is a real sense that there's a need for consultation beyond what they have planned, then we can convey that to them. But it would be our guess at the moment, and it is only a guess, is that it will be a relatively focused area of consultation rather than throwing the whole thing in the mix again. And if that's the case, it may be that one meeting would do it with invited stakeholders. But let's keep an open mind on that, and if we need to, we can ask for further consultation if that should be required. Is there anything, Rebecca, you'd like to add to that?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I can add that when I spoke to the advisor from MB yesterday, I did myself convey the fact that Auckland is very large, that many of the hotspots for freedom camping in the region are actually on our rural fringes or in the far-flung parts. I did describe the sorts of travel times that people would be looking at to have to come to a meeting in the central city, and I advised that they may want to consider having more than one meeting and particularly catering to those outer areas, and failing that perhaps looking at providing a video option so that people can join via Zoom or something to that effect. What they'll do with that will be up to them, but I certainly did convey that from our own experience that one public meeting in central Auckland in the middle of a weekday is, yeah. So there will of course be the opportunity for people to make written submissions throughout that 1 month period, but at this stage I understand there is just the one meeting planned.
Okay, so let's just see how that evolves, and if need be, we can ask for a wider range of geographic locations for consultation if that's required. Okay, so look, let's start with questions, and I've got some questions already indicated. Councillor Richard Hills, first up. Okay, Councillor Kathy Casey.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Rebecca, in your report, paragraph 46, I just want to talk about the homeless for a wee while, because I think we need to ensure that they are protected from harassment through any bylaw that we have. And in particular concern is that paragraph 46, where in the years to June, 3 years to June 2019, there were 1,479 camping-related complaints. 60% about people camping where they shouldn't be camping. Up to a quarter of those were homeless people. So can you just talk to me about how you're going to make sure that we put the needs of homeless first?
Through you, Mr Chair, in the last statement of proposal, and the governing body did resolve to continue through into the next statement of proposal, a commitment to take a compassionate enforcement approach to homeless Aucklanders. This bylaw is not intended to be used to manage homelessness, and our enforcement staff on the ground, with clear direction from this body, do not intend to use the provisions of the bylaw to manage people who are living involuntarily in vehicles. So what I can tell you is the bylaw is not intended to be used for that. It's not written in such a way to punish people in that situation, and the approach on the ground will very much be to take a compassionate approach and also to connect people with social services where that is appropriate. Our enforcement staff, I understand, already take steps in that direction, and that would continue through into any new approach.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Shane Henderson. Okay, I have no other questions. Yeah, we'll come to comments next. So if no other questions, we'll now move to comments, and we'll begin with Councillor Linda Cooper. Sorry, somebody's indicated a question. Oh,
apologies there.
So with apologies to Councillor Cooper, Councillor Greg Sayers, question.
Thank you. Look, I think the documentation, the way the paper's been presented an excellent job. It seems to me to be heading in the right direction. The only, I'll just say to the working group, around the general rule, I think that's going to be the key to the overall success of this bylaw. When I read in the paper that we might think it was not viable, I got a bit nervous because that was in the other paper. We had a working group go away and come back, and it kind of didn't really work. So what I'm hoping is that rather than perhaps going in that we can't do something, for example, Tauranga's got a rule where they've stopped the parking outside of buildings, swimming pools, certain things they've been able to exercise. It's mentioned in the paper, that's what we'd like to achieve, but it seemed, and I might be wrong and happy to be corrected through the question, is can we create that, or is legal saying, no, we can't because it's not viable? I'm just a little bit nervous around that terminology. Thank you, Worship.
Katarina?
Yes. Through the chair, as of course you know that you won't be predetermining at this point what your approach is to a general rule in the future. We've used the word viable to ensure that we've got a question around we will look at clear options around what can be done. We will have to balance an overall approach to ensure that we're not the cumulative impact of decision making is not effectively banning or freedom camping, which wouldn't be within the policy intent of the Freedom Camping Act. So all that's indicating is at this point in time you have an open mind about what the future is for a general rule, and that you will look at options which the working party will get the first look at and make your determination at a future time.
Thank you. And I guess I'm just signalling the Tauranga example, which might be helpful. Also, Your Worship, I noticed Minister just talking about the government, talking about government's moves and things like that. I did notice that Minister Nash came out kind of strongly against freedom camping, and saying, you know, it's kind of a low-value tourism with the huge costs and disruption caused to local communities, you know, for low-spending tourists. And so, I guess, do we need to be providing as many spots, you know? So we're trying to create, you know, more places where freedom camping can go, and so they've got somewhere to go. I guess that, what question that raises in my mind, Your Worship, is our own holiday parks, you know, and the potential for those to be additional spots where perhaps people are encouraged to use and utilise its revenue for the council as well. So I know that wasn't covered in the paper, but was there any thought given around that, or potential thought going forward around utilising our existing assets?
Yeah, the Minister certainly did talk about the difference between wanting to attract what he called high value and lower value, as against lower value tourists. I think he has fine-tuned some of his thinking on it, judging from other statements that I've heard since. I don't think we can yet ask officials what his change in approach compared to, say, his predecessor might be. We've just got to wait till government delivers what the document is that we're consulting on. And at the end of the day, I think where we got to in the workshop was we're all pretty happy that reserves, which we all saw as a vulnerable area for misuse by freedom camping, has now been dealt with. The other important thing is that whatever restrictions we put in, that we keep within the boundaries of the statute, because it's a little bit futile and makes us look a little incompetent if we do something that is outside the statute and we're overturned by a court of law. So let's see what the Minister comes up with, and it may be that if required, we could have a further discussion around that. But I think with the discussions we've already had, we've got a fairly good idea of where councillors are coming from. And, you know, we can't and don't want to ban freedom camping across the board, but we do want to limit the inconvenience and damage that might be done by people that are using their right to freedom camp irresponsibly. And that's what we'll be focused on. But is there anything you'd like to add to that, Katarina?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, it will depend today on which option you take. And just to clarify, setting aside reserves, where freedom camping is prohibited already right now, the Freedom Camping Act exists right now, allowing freedom camping as of right now, apart from on reserves. The role of option 2, if you choose that option, is only to look at which sites therefore are different to what is permitted already. So I think we just need to remember the permissive intent of the core legislation for the options we're considering.
Thank you for that. Personally, I'm favouring option B, which is the recommendation from the officers. I just wondered with the question around the holiday parks, if there's any comment around the utilisation of our existing facilities in a greater way.
To be honest, I don't have the facts and figures in front of me in terms of the current utilisation. I understand that actually the number of camping grounds throughout New Zealand is reducing due to the value of that land. I think the camping grounds we have tend to be well subscribed, but if you're particularly interested in looking at those figures, I can go away and come back with those from our colleagues in Parks, who I understand is a department looking after those.
Thank you. I guess I just wondered if the reason why I've asked the questions, I've wondered if it's helpful in terms of the coming up with our statement of proposal, really, and because when we talked about last time, Your Worship, it seemed that could be a viable option, that we might try and encourage that through our own bylaw. Now, I don't know if that's possible or not, so I'm just asking that question because we do have a lot of them in Auckland. I don't think we've sold any, so I just wonder if there is opportunity for greater utilisation and if this is the right mechanism.
I think while we can't compel people to use our camping grounds, we would certainly want to steer people in the direction to using camping grounds where they have all of the facilities, including rubbish disposal, as against parking on the side of the road, which also has some safety concerns. So, yeah, I know where the Deputy Mayor lives. I mean, we've got a camping ground and right next to it a reserve, and people have been freedom camping on the reserve when generally they could, for a relatively small sum of money, have got the facilities of the camping ground. But let's have a look at that. Obviously, it's we can't push people to do that, but by discouraging people and making it as it is illegal to camp on a reserve area, then people would be naturally pointed in the direction of using a camping ground where you've got security as well as facilities. Okay, I've got a number of questions now. Councillor Richard Hills.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for all the work that's been done. I know how complicated this is. And it kind of stems from actually Councillor Sayers' questions just on the comms, and not telling you how to suck eggs, but I guess how can we improve or make it a lot simpler for people this time, maybe with FAQs or things that we can share along the way. I know that there was elected member confusion and stories out there, and because it's so widespread and everyone's got a little story, just how we can strip it right back to what Kat just said around you know, what the law currently is, because a lot of people were like, why are you doing this to us? And it's like, well, one, we have to, there's, you know, so just being able to strip it back to the law, why we need to implement this, that sort of comms on it, because I think a lot of people just thought it was just our brilliant idea and we were doing this because we wanted to. And actually there's a far greater picture how we can keep reminding people who probably, you know, many people might see this for the first time this year. We're all kind of used to it. But yeah, thank you.
I think that's probably something we'd want to take on board. This process doesn't go through the full process of consultation again, does it? Yes. It does?
Yes.
Okay.
Also, Mr Chair, this is probably better when we get to the actual statement of proposal that comes back here, and then look at the comms, because our policy staff aren't our comms people. But
okay, and no, that's right. And if we are doing consultation, then clearly we need to communicate very well what we're consulting on and why. And then when we make the decision, we need to communicate on why that decision was made and the parameters within which we made it. And that may be Councillor Cooper, something through yourself as chair of the regulatory committee that you might like to pick up responsibility for, supported by the rest of us, of course. Councillor Hills, further question?
Oh, yeah, no, I know they're not the comm staff, but I'm just saying a cheat sheet early on can help us, because the stories start coming out this week, if and it becomes like last time, it gets legs, and all of us then defend, and Linda tried her best last time to
We
try
had
and...
Q&As last
Yeah.
time.
So through the chair, we certainly acknowledge that we can improve our communications to Aucklanders on topics like this, which are both they're passionate about and are complicated. We believe we can start our communications earlier than waiting for the statement of proposal time. And if you have a look at one of the attachments, I think it's attachment A, you can already see as staff we're trying to take the aspects of the Freedom Camping Act and turn them into more usable communications about how the law works, and we will definitely be using those in communications after this meeting and moving ahead. So please be assured that we know we need to improve, and we also know we need to start communications before statement of proposal.
Thank you very much. Councillor Daniel Newman.
Good morning and thank you. Rebecca, I firstly want to acknowledge the complexity of the issue and the skill that you've demonstrated here with the preparation of your report. It's a very good report addressing a very complex matter in quite a succinct way. I wish that this kind of paper was going to Cabinet, because Cabinet would benefit from the quality of your analysis, in my view. And I certainly support option 2. So you're addressing at paragraph 52 in the report the context for the work, the preparatory work leading up to the preparation of the statement of proposal around the draft bylaw in the previous term. I think option 2 will largely usurp some of this because we're moving to a different framework. However, I have to say, thinking back to the previous term, I disagreed with some of the assessment and analysis around some of the parks and reserves that took place. I'm assuming that that analysis really becomes moot if we move to option 2 anyway, because we're effectively being regulated by the Reserves Act. But what do we use, what role does that assessment work have now moving forward with the Working Party? Because I disagree with aspects of the assessment in relation to certain parks and reserves, particularly in my ward.
Through the chair, so you were correct that in some respects some of that becomes moot. We already have assessments that would form the basis of the new statement of proposal that would go forward. However, when it comes to reserves, many of our parks are made up of multiple parcels of land, and they can be held under different pieces of legislation. So sometimes what someone may be called a reserve, but there may be part of it that is actually held under the Local Government Act, perhaps a car park or a piece on the side. So there is a layer of complexity there around being precise on some of those. However, a huge amount of work was done. Certainly the, sorry, did you want to add there, Katarana?
Yes, sorry, just to answer your question, if the committee decides option 2, you'll see that there are only approximately 21, 22 existing assessments for that option. Those assessments, we are pretty sure they are land that are not reserves. Those assessments did go through a public consultation process. They went through the bylaw panel. They came out the other end. They are the only assessments we intend to use. And they are a small number. The majority of the rest fall away if option 1 is not chosen, because they were essentially reserves, which will no longer form part of option 2 moving forward. So there would only be about 22 and future work on the general rule.
Okay, so without wanting to preempt what the Working Party and the officers will do, I'm assuming that with the balance of sites for assessment, that there would be an opportunity to re-examine them in the context not only of whether the assessment remains appropriate, but also to whether the approach in relation to the balance of land as per option 2, whether anything has changed that would lead us to conclude a different approach in relation to those particular sites remaining?
So at the moment, the sites for option 2 are listed in attachment B. They're on pages 16, 18 and 19. At this point, there was not large plans to do a total reassessment of all those sites.
Okay, so look, I'm happy to vote for this, Chair, but I would, Your Worship, but I would hope that those on the working party would really give consideration to those 21 sites, because there is an implication for the council in terms of council land used for this particular purpose. But that is a matter for the working party, and I'll trust their judgment and reserve my right to speak.
Just to clarify, Councillor, those are the sites for prohibition and restriction, because using a purely Freedom Camping Act approach with the reserves outside of scope, everything's permitted unless it's prohibited or restricted. So the sites I'm referring to are the assessments staff have done so that they can be prohibited or restricted. Without those assessments, they would therefore be permitted.
I accept that, but there are some sites that are subject to restriction where I, to be frank, felt that possibly we need to go from restriction to prohibition. So it's for those, because I've got quite a conservative approach in relation to this, but reserve my right to speak.
Thank you very much. I think it is important for everybody to realise that the default position of the Freedom Camping Act is that people can camp everywhere other than where it is restricted or prohibited. What our role is, having now reaffirmed that we have a way of enforcing prohibition on camping on reserves, is to put on that list sensitive areas that meet the requirement of the Act to be prohibited. If they don't meet the requirements of the Act, then it's an exercise in futility. So that's the judgment that has to be made, and there's presumably a little bit of discretion about whether it would or not meet the terms of the Act, and that's something that our working party will perhaps take some time to look at, as well as the general rule. Councillor John Watson.
Actually, it might be more appropriate as a brief comment. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so we're out of questions. The mover has the right to make an introductory comment and then to have a right of reply, and then follow that with Councillor John Watson. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. I think I just want to reassure Councillor Newman that those sites will then go out to public consultation. So there will be feedback, there will be that opportunity to relook at any restricted, but to be quite honest, we've actually done a huge amount of the work has been done now with the Reserves Act and our ability to infringe, and I think that will take a lot of the angst out of the community, because before we could only, if somebody parked on a reserve, we'd have to take them to court, which makes it a very difficult process. So, so that's fine. The other thing I wanted to talk to was paragraph 29, and it hopes to allay Councillor Casey's fears around the fact that this would not apply to people staying overnight in tents, people parked legally during the day, or anybody resting or sleeping at the roadside, or living in a vehicle due to homelessness. That is not what the intention is. And I think that's really important, because in the last attempt at this, a general rule was taken out because of that fear, but that actually undermined the whole process. So we need to have a general rule that can give us some reassurance, some controls, but by virtue of the name of the Act, the Freedom Camping Act, we have no ability to ban it outright, because we must be, we can't be ultra vires. So that also speaks to Councillor Sayer's comments about using our campgrounds. Well, by very nature of a campground, there's a fee. And by very nature of the name of the Freedom Camping Act, it means it has to be free with no charge. So, and also we have contracts with a lot of our existing contracts with a lot of our lessees who manage these on our behalf, and we couldn't require them mid-contract to then suddenly not charge for their service. So I think we've really got a job in encouraging people to use those, but the Freedom Camping Act is permissive. So I think I want to really commend this option 2 to you. I think it gives us a really good way forward. I think it'll allay a lot of people's concerns. We'll have a really strong working group looking at a general rule that is fair across the board, and mindful that this is a regional bylaw. It is very hard to look at things through just an area lens. We have to look at right across the board. So I want to thank our legal staff who work as well really closely with our bylaw staff to bring you a really robust report here and a robust way forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor John Watson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I think probably most councillors will be pleased with the way this is tracking. It has caused a lot of angst all around Auckland, but in some areas more than others. So I'm reassured that in the first instance, as far as the working group goes, that there is going to be some local board members from the north, because that's important. If you're going to get a flavour of some of the biggest hot spots and the associated issues there, it's pretty important, those people involved. So I thank you for that offer, and I'm sure they'll be only too willing to take it up. As far as the general issue goes, and I understand, the comments Katarina has made about the permissive nature of the Act, and certainly right across New Zealand, that's caused trouble just about wherever you have looked. And I think it's important if once again in our contacts with government and the new minister, who seems to be at least willing to consider looking at things perhaps differently, that the situation in Auckland is again emphasised, because one of the things I see happening, we were in a workshop yesterday again with this planning impositions that really aren't appropriate to Auckland, and if we look at Auckland in terms of freedom camping, not only have we had a lot of problems that have really strained our resources and caused any number of difficulties, we do have other solutions that are different from other areas. So Councillor Sayers mentioned the camping grounds, but there is another in between there that should at least be brought to these people's attentions, so that they realise that it's not just like putting down a big concrete door. For instance, our regional parks, over the last year in particular, they have been used increasingly for contained camping. I'm not talking about the camping grounds, I'm talking about sections of the park that have been set aside. Now, that doesn't annoy any other residents. It's a beautiful spot, more often than not. It's safe, there's safety in numbers, there's doors locked, etc., etc. Now, we have a suite of parks where that can happen, indeed it is happening. That differentiates us from other parts of Auckland. So once again, I would like a stronger advocacy role in these conversations, because we are capable of finding our own solutions without just having to blithely pander to whatever dictates come down that cause us trouble, as this issue has done. So I certainly would, and I'm not sure of the applicability to this particular procedure, but I have noticed in my own ward where people, and they're obviously not overseas people at the moment, but they're taking up that offering, which is between free and a campground, but is utilising an existing council resource. To be honest, it is better than a campground and doesn't annoy anyone. So I chuck that in there for what that's worth. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. That's a helpful suggestion. Councillor Daniel Newman.
No, I'm just going to vote for it.
Thank you. Councillor Angela Dalton.
Well, thank you, and I'm really happy to be part of the working group with Councillors Cooper and Simpson. It's really important that there is a balance, isn't there? Because freedom camping, when we talk about it, it seems to have a negativity about it. We look at it with negative lenses, like it's a destructive, just about a blanket thing that's going on. So although that I've been, I've experienced where that has happened in my particular ward, and it's caused disruption to our community, I've also freedom camped myself. And when I was a young mum with 4 young children, my husband and I had a big Bedford bus, self-contained, 4 bunks in the back, and that's how we holidayed, because that's all we could afford to do. And sometimes it meant taking that bus to visit family in another city, and you had to park on the road. We weren't disruptive. We just had a big bus. It might have looked unsightly, and I'm sure people wouldn't have wanted it there for a long time. But it was the way we got around, and it's the way we holidayed as a family, and it was fun. And so we need to be able to get some balance around what we're doing and our thinking around freedom camping, and that when we say it, it isn't a negative thing. It's an opportunity for families to go away on holiday, or for couples to go away on holiday, and everyone has, different lifestyles, don't they? So I'm looking forward to working alongside Councillor Cooper and Simpson as we go through this phase of the Freedom Camping Bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and probably there's a number of us in the same situation as Councillor Dalton. I travelled all around Europe in a combi van, and we didn't litter and we didn't do things that we shouldn't have done. But it is finding a way of making sure we've got proper protections against those that abuse the principle of freedom camping without being a police state that says you must do this and you must do that and you must not do something else. And I think we can find that balance in this way. Councillor Linda Cooper, do you want to use your right of reply?
It's actually really refreshing to hear Councillor Dalton speak the way she has. I think what we've all noticed over the last year where we couldn't travel is a lot more people with money can, with their self-contained lovely camper vans, which is what the Minister's really talking about here, is the vehicle, not where people can go. I think in this upcoming work is that those people are probably of an average age of around here, got a bit of money, can go around, can visit their relatives, which they see New Zealand, which they haven't done before. I certainly spent a month in the South Island on a bicycle though, and in motels, but I think that's the changing nature of so-called freedom camping now, and I think it's an opportunity, but we do need to strike a balance. The other issue I see is that I know that a lot of complaints I've had from the Orewa area from very angry people have actually been about homeless people. They actually haven't been about freedom campers as such. They're people without homes. They're New Zealand people. And so the freedom camping bylaw doesn't cover those people. We need other ways of either helping or supporting those people, but also those people have been parking on reserves, and now we have some way to deal with those people other than taking them to court. And that's been the difficulty in the implementation of doing anything about those people in our graduated approach, because taking a homeless person to court doesn't really get you anywhere. And it costs us a lot of money. So I think there's other ways to help those people. The freedom camping bylaw isn't that, and yelling at people about it doesn't help either. So I think this is a really good way forward. I think we're actually of a time now when we don't have a lot of overseas visitors. We have less people in vehicles that are not self-contained, which has been the biggest issue for us. So I think that will actually help maybe the reception of this back out into the public. They'll be more reassured that we've got some sort of tools to make sure people aren't camping on our reserves. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cooper. And your travels around the South Island by bike was an inspiration to all of us following you on Facebook over Christmas. It's been moved and seconded. I'll put the motions. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. I declare that carried, I think, without dissent. So we come now to item number 10. Thank you very much to our officers. And when I say thank you to our officers for the last item, our legal people have put hours and hours of work into this, as well as our staff focused on the policy aspects, and do want to acknowledge their enormous efforts. So item number 10 is about the meeting of the Local Government New Zealand conference in Blenheim and the AGM, I think in July, 15th to 17th of July. And what we're trying to do here is work out how we're going to get, how many people we want to send down and which people we might choose. And council officers have provided some very clear advice on that. To put the motion on the record, I'll move it and ask for a seconder. Councillor Pippa Coombe, and welcome Elodie Fontaine and Rose Leonard to the table. And Rose, are you leading? Yeah.
Today we're asking you to make a decision as a governing body about your attendance at the LGNZ conference in Blenheim on the 15th and 17th of July, and to appoint your AGM delegates. Today you can make decisions about your own attendance for your governing body members, and you can decide to send less people if you wish. The option we've recommended was within the significantly reduced budget allocated to Kura Kawana, your elected member development budget, for conference attendance. Some local boards have very strong views about the importance of attendance at this conference, and I've taken into consideration when recommending this option to you that there is a wide range of opinions across local boards, but also across yourselves. The option, that's why we've chosen that option, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. If I can just add, I've put up another chair's recommendation there, which takes into account of what Rose has just said. I think it would be an incredibly bad look if, you know, probably as many as, 40 people turned up at an AGM at the cost of tens of thousands of dollars. Kind of be contradictory to all the messages we've been sending out about the need to constrain our expenditure because of the emergency and the recovery budgets. So we've nominated 6 people, and they've all been nominated on the basis of the ongoing role they play within local government New Zealand. That seemed to be a logical criterion. We have not set out in the recommendations what the local boards should do, simply because we don't have the power to do that. Nevertheless, I know the local boards kind of look forward to this, and we usually have 21 delegates going down there from the local boards. My chair's recommendation is simply to say we recognise that you have the authority to send who you wish and the number you wish to the conference, but please take into account the circumstances in which we and the community find ourselves in the COVID era. I don't think we can go beyond that, but I do think it's worthwhile making that statement from this body. So I'd commend that additional resolution to you, and we'll now take questions on it. And I'm just...
Sorry, Mr Mayor, it's a seconder. Can I just ask, I've got a query about that addition.
I've got you on my question list. Would you like to raise?
Wait for the question, but I'm just not sure why that's needed in the context of the report, and I'd just like to ask a question about...
Okay, I'll take that question at that point, and but I have got a list here, and I'll just take it in the order that I've got it. So we begin with Councillor Desley Simpson. Question, please.
Thanks, Your Worship. My first question is to the Chief Executive, and that is why, when we're in emergency budget and we're doing the must-dos, not nice-to-dos, did a paper manage to get here through the system that didn't put up the most cost-effective option as an officer recommendation? There's $15,000 difference.
Thank you, Councillor. What we've done here is tried to arrive at a recommendation that strikes the balance between the affordability as well as the importance of our representation at what is really the most important local government conference in New Zealand. And given the size and scale of Auckland, we took a view, our team took a view that it is important that we send adequate representation, but recognised that we had to work within the affordability parameters of our budget, and our budget was reduced from last year down to this year of, I think it was around 40,000. And so we've made a recommendation within the budget that we had allowed for, but a recommendation at the same time that represents the importance of Auckland's role in local government in New Zealand.
Okay, so I would reserve my right to speak, but my second question is, maybe to you, why do we actually, we've got 4 people that we need to send to the AGM, is that correct? Why can't those 4 people be our representatives, full stop? Why do they need extra people to help them for the rest of the conference?
Through the chair. The AGM just represents the one part of the conference, and there is value in the attendance of the rest of the conference. And I was wanting to strike a really balanced attendance across GB and local boards. You could decide as a body to send fewer people if you wish.
Right, thank you. My next question, just 2 and then I'll wait and then come back to me if you've got time. My next question is, what, if anything, are we saying to local government New Zealand about the ability that we should be in these tough times for every council in New Zealand? I mean, boy, you think our rates rises are steep when look at everybody else's. What message are we giving to them that they should provide some of this opportunity online or in a different way? Because they make a lot of money out of this conference. And that's a question I hope somebody at the AGM asks them specifically, how much do they earn from these conferences? I've read their annual report, I hope you have, but please ask that question at the AGM. So what are we doing about that?
Through the chair, the team have been in constant, I would say, conversation with LGNZ about the situation that we find ourselves in, and many, as you say, many other councils, and they are considering options for if COVID lockdown occurs and if we need to defer the meeting or put it online, but so far they've not given us any advice about taking this to an online conference or to just laying out the conference in a different way or holding it biannually or anything like that. So we will keep you posted of that, but so far we've received no advice from them on that.
What are we doing to ask them to accept that more? Yeah. And then my final question, just for the moment, I have more, but I'll leave it for now, is in this really tight time for everybody, how can you help me explain to ratepayers of Auckland that this is an absolute must-do?
Through the chair, I would just say that many elected members find value in being with other elected members around the country who are facing similar issues. And that is the value for those members who attend. That is why many want to attend. In fact, many might want to send more people and have in the past. So I think that the message to constituents would be that we have really significantly reduced this budget and our costs and have arrived at a balanced attendance across GB and local boards.
Thanks. I mean, in some ways those questions, Councillor, are political for us to determine, understand exactly where you're coming from. I would just make this one other point. Auckland is a third of the population of this country, and we presumably could be represented by having a third of the delegates at the conference, which would give us, you know, theoretically 60 or 70 people that would attend. We're talking about 6 people coming from this body. Our problem, my preference actually would be, I hate conferences. I'd rather do it online. We had a very successful online conference, Councillor Coombe. Actually, when I say very successful, the content was good, the technology was appalling, and that might answer your question as well. But there is a bit of a feeling around the country that because we're big, we're arrogant, we're dismissive of what everybody else thinks. And if we send 3 people down, that would be seen as an arrogant statement of disregard for the body of councillors that make up local government New Zealand. So, yep, we need to be careful in our expenditure. You and I are both strong advocates of that. But I think we've found a balance here where we have a limited number of people going down who will participate because they are involved in the organisation, and it's an indication that we stand alongside the colleagues in around the rest of the country. But the more we could do online, the other answer is, from my point of view, the better. Thank you for that. Councillor Kathy Casey.
I have a question about remits and the timeline on remits. Yesterday we had an excellent presentation from Auckland Transport, and the Mayor has already written a letter to Minister Salisa with regard, Porter Williams, with regard to the advocacy points that they raised yesterday. According to the report, have we missed the deadline? Because I would really like to see those advocacy points enshrined with our delegates to go before LG&Z. Also parking, what did you say yesterday, Chris, about parking? Can I just get confirmation that we're not too late to do that?
No, we're not too late. It's my understanding. We've got plenty of time, but Rose, you might have the timeline.
We've got until 14th of May. We can put additional remits in.
Excellent. And just for the record, I've only been to Local Government New Zealand Conference once, and that was to fight for LG&Z support for a ban on the private sale and use of fireworks, and we won that debate. But I'm with Desley. I think in this current climate, we should be paring it back to the absolute minimum, because it is a bad look. It's still seen as a junket by people out there.
Thank you, and it was a very good, a very successful speech, Councillor Casey, which indicates actually the value of you being there and our delegation getting behind it, because that was actually a bit of a turning point, I think, for local government New Zealand. But look, for remits, I mean, we don't go down there, you know, to enjoy the vineyards of Blenheim. We go down there to participate in the conference. We should put our remits up, and I would invite every councillor to think of what you might like to see come positively out of that. And I think Councillor Casey has made a very strong point about the enforcement of our drink driving and speeding as a way of getting to Vision Zero. So certainly encourage councillors to put forward remits for that. Councillor Papakoon.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Kia ora koutou. Just in terms of the local board decision making, so they haven't made it yet that they're only willing to send one person per, or the formula that you're recommending.
The paper is currently going through local boards at the moment, so some have made resolutions and some have not yet considered the matter, through the chair, sorry. Some are happy to accept our recommendations and will be participating in the process to decide on 6 additional members. Others are not happy and have been, will be using their individual development budgets as they are permitted to do under the policy.
And just some points of just additional bits of information, I guess. The conference is taking place in our recess week, isn't it? So it's not going to interrupt any council business, and the AGM is on the Saturday following the 3 days, so it's actually quite a big commitment to stay on for the AGM as well. And another question I had too was, could I just answer the question about the remits, because there is actually a slightly different take on that, because I would like to comment and speak in support, but just in terms of answering that question about the remits, the other side of it that's being discussed at National Council is that remits are not actually a very good way of developing the policy of local government, and they've got a huge workload. There's so much going on when you think about the Three Waters reform, RMA reform, you know, all the, just huge amounts. So to have these remits pop up that can be very random is not actually a very good way of developing that policy. And also, as Auckland Council, I mean, I very encourage everybody to think about remits, and I think that happened at the Auckland Zone and coming through local boards, but Auckland Council hasn't traditionally used that as a tool to try and leverage our advocacy, because we are big and ugly and can do it ourselves in some ways. So I do just caution that about the remit process. The one area I think that we could be maximising our visibility is around, we've never ever won a major award at the conference, just a few minor projects, and that's because we haven't put things forward. We haven't used the nominations, and I know that's something that local boards are keen to do more of. So hopefully that there have been nominations that have come through, because we've got some fantastic projects and successes that could be showcased. So that was sort of answering some questions, but I would like to be able to speak in support at the right time as well, when I get that opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Just to clarify, I understand the point about remits, but I think we're still working on the remit system, aren't we? You know, having 60 or 70 separate remits and minimum period of time to speak to them is a bit of an exercise in futility. So it might make more sense if we structured our debates, but as I understand it, and this is a question, we are still working on the basis of them considering remits rather than changing the format of the conference. Is that correct or not?
That's my understanding of it.
And you can't provide, there's been no shift in policy from your attendance at the last meeting of they're still considering remits rather than restructuring it?
Oh, absolutely. It's just been raised as an issue that this is actually getting a bit out of control, because all councils are getting really excited about doing as many remits as possible, and so it's becoming really unwieldy. And as you know, we did that online, having, I think it was about 30 remits to work through, vote on online. You know, it was, yeah, some are cold out on the way through, but it's really getting more and more each year.
Okay, no, thank you for that.
But yes, it is still going through the process.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Daniel Newman.
Look, we kind of addressed this in relation, because it goes to Jay. I attended a Papakura local board meeting last night. I understand that the advice that's being given to local boards is that they will have they nominate somebody to go forward for their sort of sub-regional clusters, where a person from that cluster will be voted on to be the cluster representative. So what are there, 4 clusters plus rurals?
Through the chair, yes, so 6 in total.
Yeah. So, Your Worship, I understand Jay. I just really am not sure if it necessarily adds a lot of value, given that the boards are acting. I observe the boards acting on the advice that's been given, and I think that those boards are very conscious of the financial situation that we face. So, Your Worship, I don't want to speak in opposition to a chair's recommendation, but I just wonder if Jay is appropriate under the circumstances. I think the boards, to a greater extent, do understand this and they're acting accordingly.
Yeah, that'd be great if that is the case, Councillor. I think, though, what we're doing is sending a message to the public as well. If somebody's following this and saying, you know, huge delegation allowed by council to go to conference on the back of the ratepayer's dollar, we're just making the statement, which is an obvious statement, I guess, and that's your point, that we all need to be concerned in the current environment, and that's why we'll probably have lesser representation than normal. I would hope, and I think we've heard from officers that a lot of the boards are taking that on board. Some may not be. Councillor Wayne Walker.
I just really wanted to speak to the comments that Councillor Simpson was making. What's that? Can't hear.
So, sorry, we're just waiting for your question, Councillor.
Sure. So my question is around remote attendance. I would have thought that this would have been something that local government New Zealand would have been actively promoting. It would enable more engagement. It's a better geographical fit for a place like New Zealand. It goes to resilience. So I'm quite staggered that there doesn't appear to be much information around that. So I would put it by way of a question, can we have that as a remit? so that we actually advance remote attendance to these conferences?
I don't believe that would fall within the remit criteria, Councillor Walker, but rest assured that we are really working to help LGNZ understand our position on this, on remote attendance being highly desirable. They will make videos of the conference, keynote speeches, etc. available after the conference, but the point you're making is a good one. We will continue making that.
Thank you. Councillor Linda Cooper.
Thank you. My question is, I mean, this is in the individual development budget, but to me it doesn't, I don't understand. To me it's not professional development. This is representing Auckland on important things. Run the AGM of an organisation, so that's not development, and also working on things like remits, going to the government. I don't see it as professional development. So what, because that actually limits then any other opportunities. If there might be something that would really be professional development for an elected member, would we not have a budget that, you know, I mean, I don't understand why we put it there, and would there be a better place to put it, maybe in future, or another kind of budget that this could come out of? Because I actually do think having to pay, I mean, I really commend people saying they'll pay $900 each, you know, on top of this. It's quite an undertaking to do something that for your work. If you didn't work here, if you weren't an elected member, you would not be doing this. It's clearly work. It's not individual professional development.
Yeah, I think Rose is looking at me on that one. I understand what you're saying, Councillor. I mean, I think there is an element of learning in the attendance. It's one view of individual development. It's perhaps been somewhat reluctant to use the word opportunistic as a way of getting people down there. But I think for those that have attended conferences, I mean, if you're an old hand at it, yeah, there's probably not much learning. But if you're new to local board or new to the governing body, you get to learn a lot, not simply through the formal sessions, but the chance to meet, discuss, and develop ideas with others. So it may not be a perfect basket to fund it from, but that's the way that it's been done, I think, over a long period of time, Rose. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Just to be really clear, the Kura Kawana budget, which is your elected member development budget covering GB and local boards, has a conference element and the separate IDB budget. So the conference element was reduced significantly, and also the IDB for each of you individually, the allocation was halved in line with the professional development budgets of staff being halved through the emergency budget situation. So we have a conference budget sitting within Kura Kawana, which is $40,000, and we have halved the IDB budget.
So the other question, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, is have we ever met, you know, actually filled the budget, used the budget? Because, I mean, last year, would we have? I mean, I don't, I mean, apart from using it for conference, for actual professional development.
If you've got that information, Rose.
Well, in a very broad sense, last year, because the conference occurred online and it was only the Mayor and Councillor Coombs that went, there was very little cost. So there is a little bit of money in the kete from last year. So it's funded over an electoral term for 3 years. So there is a little bit of money in the kete.
What I'm saying is, though, without a conference, even in normal times, would we actually meet that? I think I've only accessed it once in my 7, I think this is my 8th year, 7th year.
I would have to go back and look for more information.
I just wonder, because if we're only really using it, it's a bit, to me, it's a little bit misleading to say we're using that if, for a lot of us, we're not using it at all. Only, we use it for people to go to conference.
Yeah, I think it's a topic in its own right, not central to our discussions today, but how the individual development funding is used and whether there are better ways of getting better results out of it. happy for that conversation to take place, but it's not integral to what we're doing today. But today's a good opportunity to reflect on whether we need to have a further discussion around that. Councillor Chris Darby.
Thanks, Mayor. Just going to the remits, I'd like to sort of pick up what Councillor Casey is focusing on. We did have an email from Rose inviting this some time ago, and there were about 5 attachments to that email, Rose, but it was pretty clear. And I think one of the problems I think that is happening at Local Government New Zealand is there's a plethora of remits coming in, and they actually a lot of them don't seem to satisfy the criteria of being of a national interest, critical matters of the moment. A lot of them appear to be a bit more localised, and therefore it's a lot of resource trying to sort of sift all this. So I would suggest that if we are lodging a remit, that we actually lodge the idea politically, but it needs to be progressed through our staff, and we need to narrow down what we think is really important. Now, having said that, picking up on the comments of Councillor Casey and yesterday's workshop, Vision Zero and Transport Safety, and some concerns that we are now very aware of, and your correspondence following that workshop yesterday, Mayor, which was excellent. And that is exactly reinforced in our ATAP resolutions, which we passed a week ago, and our strategy team has emphasised that as an area. So I'm hearing from a political place and a management place that there is a very important strategic matter that we probably need to be homing in on. So I would be encouraging of not just spilling a whole lot of ideas. Maybe we need to focus on those matters of foremost interest, which are also national issues, they're not just Auckland issues, as outlined in our ATAP resolutions, which was about transport safety and compliance, all the items that you were raising yesterday. So where I'm leaving this is probably with the Chief Executive to ask the relevant staff, Auckland Transport and strategy people, to work that up. If it just gets worked up by politicians, it'll be a muddle of words. The ideas have been generated, but they need to be worked up now by our management.
Thanks, Councillor. I think Local Government New Zealand itself has a winnowing process to work out because it can't cope with massive amounts. I said before, in answer to Councillor Simpson, we needed to be down there to show that we weren't being arrogantly dismissive of Local Government New Zealand. Equally, we don't want to totally dominate the time. Therefore, there's a limited number of remits that you can actually discuss. And I think maybe the people that we determine will represent the governing body down there need to go, send all your ideas in by all means, but we need to probably focus, as you've said, strategically on 2 or 3 matters that are of particular importance, and staff by all means could feed into that. But I would hope that elected representatives would just have a think about that. And it does need to be something that's not simply specific to Auckland. Otherwise, while we're taking it to LGNZ, it's something that we want LGNZ to get behind our policy position on, to give it greater oomph when it comes to the government, because most of them are directed to the government. So I think your idea is a good one. I think the 6 people we determined to go down there will need to consider the remits, consider what are the strategically most important, and focus on that. And I think in previous occasions, we've divided up the speaking between the different the delegates that are there. So thank you for that comment. Councillor Sharon Stewart.
Thank you. I actually think Jay's a very good idea, because I can remember, I think the Christchurch one in 2018, of the 9 local board members for Howick, I think 7 or maybe 8 of them all went. Oh. And so I think it is important, because they couldn't decide who, so they all, I think one was sick and maybe one was overseas on holiday. They all went.
Thank you, Councillor. I think we've all taken on board the message in that comment. Councillor Desley Simpson to finish on questions.
Sorry. Sorry about that. I wonder if the mover and seconder would consider another recommendation that those attending report back on the benefit that they have gained from attending this conference. It's not part of the recommendation, and I don't know why it isn't. I wondered if you would consider that, a memo or something collectively back to this committee.
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea, because the conference isn't simply about 6 of the people that are chosen to go down to represent the council. It's about everybody. So we need to have a report. I thought I'd done one last time, Councillor Coon. Yeah. I think we need to highlight, for the benefit of councillors, what the key decisions were. I'm almost certain I did something last time, because I remember going through it, and it's a good exercise for those that attend, and it's a good accountability back from those who attend to those that weren't able to attend, and a provision of information. So we'll most certainly do that, and thank you. That's I think I'm happy simply to say we probably don't need to move it formally, but we will report back to you, and you've made a good point. Councillor Chris Fletcher.
Thank you, Your Worship. And in the interests of consistency, because we very rarely at the governing body have a discussion about the role of local government New Zealand, my question is to Jim Stabeck, and it's a question that I have posed to his predecessors in Doug Mackay and to Stephen Town. As much as we play an important role in New Zealand in RFing our brothers and sisters within local government land, for the extensive costs that are associated by virtue of our membership, I have asked them and have never received a reply where the actual benefits lie in a policy sense, because the advocacy, because Auckland is so very different to other parts of New Zealand, so often it's representation to central government, it's representation that we need to undertake directly from Auckland because our interests differ. I don't want to be a party pooper in terms of people going and attending conferences, but I would really like some better understanding of the investment that we're putting into local government New Zealand, whether that then means that we can have fewer staff working in areas of policy formulation. So it's an open-ended question to you. I'm really interested in what the relevance is. I see it very much at local board land, and I don't want to interfere within that, but at a strategic level for this governing body, we haven't had a reasonably current discussion around local government's costs and relevance to us as a governing body, and I would appreciate your advice on that. Thank you.
Councillor, thank you. If I may take that question on notice, given my relative newness to the environment and the breadth of the question, if that's okay, if I could take that on notice.
Very much. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So we probably intermingled a little bit of comment with our questions in the last session, but if there's anybody that wishes to make comments in addition to what they may have had the opportunity to say so far, I've got Councillor Daniel Newman first, and then Councillor Desley Simpson.
Chair, if I could just ask that my vote be recorded against Jay.
Thank you. We'll note that. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I don't support these recommendations. If anything, I do support Jay, but I do appreciate that and believe that local boards at this time will consider the fact that we are financially challenged. But I believe that we should be at the table, but I don't believe we should be in the numbers that are suggested. I think we should have gone with the minimum, no more. Look, just because you've got budget, you don't need to spend it. We're in very tough economic times. It's okay to come in after budget, under budget rather. It's only okay to go over budget if you're talking about savings. I do just want to stress as part of my comment, I do want to stress that you ask LGNZ how much they make from their conferences, because I think that is the driver. I've had a look. I've had a look at the program, and I don't believe there is anything on the program by way of speakers, etc., that we can't access on our own. I think some of the remits would be helpful, but as I said, I do believe that we have that 2 people could do the job of 16. Last year we sent 2 people. We are not necessarily any better ahead financially. We're still going out there talking about being $1 billion short as a result of COVID, and then we've gone absolutely, in my opinion, over the line when it comes to spending on this. I'm not convinced of the benefits, and I absolutely think we need to report back, because everything we do at the moment should be must do, and we should be frugal in the way we spend it, and I just do not believe this meets that criteria. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pipcoon.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I would like to speak in support of the officer recommendations and thank them for the work they've done on this. I think Councillor Simpson is asking exactly the right questions that we need to ask about the value for money that we get from the conference, and I think there's perhaps some things not quite been put on the table yet about that value that we do get. I do say this as a LGNZ geek. I do appreciate that I have been very entrenched in LGNZ now for a decade and worked very hard to get local board representation around the table, to get the changes to the Constitution and to make our membership relevant. There's a lot of sensitivities at LGNZ around will Auckland maintain our membership. We are a third of, obviously, of councils, 78 councils. Every council is a member. We don't pay a third of the membership fees because that was negotiated down. But I do believe we get, they work very hard on our behalf, and it's very important for us to have a membership body that is fronting for us in Wellington. And the advocacy I see is quite phenomenal, and it would be good, and thanks Councillor Fletcher for asking that question, because I think it is timely around what we bring back to this table to understand where there has been a lot of working together, advocacy that's supporting our position for Auckland. How is it elevating our status as local government? And at this time, I think that's really important, especially when we have a government that is very patronising to local government and who actually are trying to take off, a lot of our, they're trying to capture a lot of our core functions, and we need to actually be elevating the status of local government. So I hope that I do support that conversation going forward in terms of the value that we're getting out of the organisation. Just to give one example I know about was, say, for example, the work on the Code of Practice. There was a lot of shared knowledge through that process, because a lot of councillors are struggling with Code of Practice work themselves, so they can leverage off our experience in that area and the work that we've got with our officers. And it is something that comes up a lot, like how are we ensuring that we're not overlapping that kind of work. So just a few points that I would like to make in terms of the value of being at conference. And yes, there was a virtual AGM last year, but there wasn't a conference. And I've just come from a conference in Dunedin last week, and I got to go there because I hitchhiked from the airport, paid for my airfares, got myself as a speaker so that I got a reduced registration, used everything I could to try and get there. And the value of actually being in person was just so incredible and energising and invigorating, and came away with a whole lot of knowledge. And I think that's for a lot of members who are able to attend, and why local board members put so much at stake in attending, is because there's a huge amount that goes on around the conference that is an opportunity to learn from senior people there, from having those conversations in the corridor, from having access to ministers and speakers that you just cannot virtually. And we've seen that with, say, APEC. APEC's happening virtually, but they're confronting all these problems that go with that. There's only a certain limitation that you can have from streaming presentations and asking questions. And two things I just want to highlight from the benefits of conferences, and I hope one of our young elected members is going to speak to this.
because of the work of the young elected members that came about through a conference, we have seen a massive increase in young elected members getting elected, and that came from that networking, advocacy through the conference that got that structure up in place, became quite a formidable group, got really visible, and now we're seeing this big increase in people putting themselves forward because they want to join that club. And the same with, I can't speak for Councillor Alf, but I know with Bonita Bigham on National Council, to have Te Maruata as a group now that are able to network at the conference. They have their separate hui, and they come together and give themselves support for Māori elected representatives. So that all happens at conference as well. And our own elected members, Māori elected members, have found that to be an incredible networking experience and a source of support. So those are two things I just wanted to really highlight about conferences that weren't obviously captured in the report, but that's why I think it's really important to be able to attend in person. But I really take on board what Councillor Simpson has said is about ensuring that value for money, that we're getting good value. And from that budget of 40,000, I think we can really capitalise it and really leverage it to ensure that we're feeling that we're getting the most from the conference. And I'm glad the point about reporting back came up. I do that religiously. I've reported every single conference I've ever attended in writing, but it's a practice that I see other elected members, it just doesn't happen as a matter of course, especially through local boards. It depends on the discipline of the chair forcing that. I am happy to be a delegate to the AGM and to stay on for the Saturday if there's a vacancy to do that. It is quite an odd process, but happy to be involved. And I've mentioned I'll definitely report back and to go during recess week. So thank you. I do commend this to members. I know it's a difficult one at this difficult financial time, but I think we can get good value for money out of $40,000. Kia ora.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Bill Cashmore.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. And I've always been a bit of a conference sceptic. However, Local Government New Zealand does provide value, and it does provide training at these conferences. Yes, there is some social functions sponsored by other companies, and that's all good and bad. There's the awards ceremony, and Auckland's been, I think every year I've been, received some award in one of those key points. But Des is also correct in the fact that we've got to watch the value for money, and I really encourage the local boards to think long and hard around this. Do you get personal betterment training, job training for being at these conferences? Most definitely. It's the workshops that precede it where you get the gains about learning how to perform your job as a governor better. The big point, and I think the Mayor made it, is that we can't be seen to be arrogant. Yeah, we might be a third of the population and pay 40% of the tax and all the figures that get quoted around this table all the time. But the other councils out there, the other 86, whatever it is, are just as important as us. And their voices are just as important as ours. And we need to sit down and listen to them and also put our views point. I think that's important. The other real get of criticality is the cabinet ministers that attend. And it gives you a chance to, en masse, as local government, challenge the government about what sort of things they are doing. And if you think about the RMA reforms that are coming, where part of it's going to be spatial planning directed from central government back to us and to the other regions of the country, that's going to be a real challenge. So these are some of the options that we have. Yes, we should attend. We are part of New Zealand. We're an important part. Yes, we need to have our voice heard. Yes, the conference makes money, but that also subsidises LGNZ, which you'd otherwise pay in fees to subscribe to LGNZ. So we are part of this. This is New Zealand Inc. And we need to be there. So, Mr Mayor, I support all the recommendations, including Jay, because I think we need to really emphasise that fact around getting value for money. And there's always reports written at the end of these conferences, every time, every year.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Hills.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, it's a shame that we debate stuff like this for so long and billion-dollar budgets just go past like this, and really important things that I think that are sometimes a waste of money just go on, or when we force Auckland Transport to reconsult 15 times on one issue costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we just, so for me, it's like a trip to Blenheim is not some sort of fun jaunt. And credit to, yeah, I've never been to Blenheim. And credit to especially Councillor Pipicum and the Deputy Mayor. They give up Fridays, Saturdays, nights to represent us quite often with LGNZ. That it's a lot of work. It's a lot of time away from your families, and it's done when the rest of us are seeing our communities or seeing our family or whatever. So it's frustrating that we're debating this, and now I'm adding to that time. But I guess my thought is, the 2019 conference, which I attended, was on my birthday. There were 600 delegates, and as people have mentioned, we're a third of the country of elected members, and we will be representing 2% of the overall delegates, even though we're a third of the country. A lot of the time in those rooms, there is a lot of Auckland hate and discussion and misinformation, and most of the time I've been spent defending our city in front of a minister, in front of officials from Wellington, in front of others, and lots of people come up, I didn't realise Auckland was doing that. I didn't realise you were doing that on water quality. I didn't realise you had that in Māori outcomes. Can we take your idea? How the heck are you guys doing those stormwater projects? Can I see that? It's all about that two-way communication, and often, unfortunately, it's defending our city from the headlines that are constant around the country about how big and bad we are, and without that, those ministers would be hearing that without our voice in the room, and that is a lot of where the water related policies been coming through government. Climate change. Me personally, I've funded the last young elected members trip I went on. I funded my own flights, went on my own because I thought it was important that we had elected member from this council there. And this year, all the LGNZ policy things, Wayne, I didn't fly down because of emissions and for cost, so I've done that by Zoom. It is extremely difficult to do because you're not listened to, you're missed, you have to kind of interrupt and try and get it in, but it was important not to spend that money and those emissions to be there. If we're debating our membership of LGNZ, that's for another time, but we're a member, and we also, as a city, fought for our own zone. We are now have an Auckland zone. We used to be a Northern Region zone, but we fought to have our own voice in our own zone and our own votes. And if we simply turned around and said to LGNZ a year or so later, no, we're not serious about this, we don't want to be part of it, and we want to minimise it because it's not important, I think that would be a real concern. And it would tell the rest of the country who are there that we don't really care and aren't interested. So I do wish that we would focus on some of the spending in other areas that are millions and millions of dollars that I wish we would focus more deeply on sometimes. So I don't think this is anything but a good thing for our city. If we're debating the membership of LGNZ, maybe we should have a workshop on that and think about that way. But this is part of what we have to do in our role. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Point of order.
Point of order, Councillor Henderson.
I would love a closure motion. Love one. But we need someone else to speak against the motion first for it to be valid. So can someone say no to the motion and then we'll put the closure motion and get out of here? Thank you. Done.
Right. I think I'll take on board your sentiment. We have spent a long time on this, and it's not a huge sum of money to justify it. I have 4 people left, and if I can just ask those 4 people, please to speak briefly and not to repeat the points of others. Councillor Tracy Mulholland.
Thank you, Your Worship. I actually would like my democratic right for my community to speak on this item, so I shall. Now, on the basis of the fact that I have attended these conferences in the past, and it might be amusing for some, but I find it quite important to, in my view, on behalf of the constituents that I represent, to strongly object to so many people attending, so many councillors attending. I'd also like to see if we are going to proceed with Jay, and I actually probably won't be supporting actually a majority of the recommendations, but if it did proceed with Jay, I would like to think that the local boards could work in a cluster method so that we've put that forward, so that it's put forward to them as a consideration that they have a representative from a cluster. We are in difficult times. We are under a lot of pressure, and it is a one-off, unique, I think, position that we are in. So I don't actually agree on the principle of the learnings that I've heard people have had. And I think if we're going to be responsible of having a relationship with central government, then we need to do that in the ways that have already been discussed here. So thanks, Your Worship. It just feels like I'm actually being pressured not to be able to have a fair and reasonable say. Kia ora.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Angela Dalton.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be quick. I'm not a conference person either, and I've heard what Councillor Simpson has said about our financial constraints, and I think if there is anybody looking at the millions and millions of dollars, it's Councillor Simpson. So it's not just about debating the 40,000, 60,000, actually, it's the principle, and she is looking seriously at all of our spend, so thank you, Councillor Simpson. I mean, I support spending the bare minimum, and I'd be happy to withdraw, but I've listened to what we've talked about. Pippa, you just articulated really, really well, and if we had a dozen Pippas to send, then we'd be absolutely getting our value for money, wouldn't we? Because you do deliver back. I've been attending, I've been nominated to go in my role as the rep for Auckland Council on the LGNZ Governance and Strategy Group. I've attended all of those meetings by Skype since they came in. Other people have gone to Wellington for them. I chose not to because of our financial constraints. And I think there is a time when you have to meet people face to face. So over the Skype, I can see some people I would like to sit down and have a conversation with. I believe it would add value. And that would be a motivator for me to want to go to the conference, along with all the reasons that Pippa has given as well. Absolutely, there should be a report back. When we had only one person go from a local board, the condition was that they reported back on what the value add was and what they could bring back to us as a local board. So it is about finding the balance between the cost of investment and what we get out of it and bring back. I think that the recommendations to send less people is the right recommendation. We do need to be at the table. I think we need to weigh up the cost versus the importance of being at the table. So I will be supporting the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor John Watson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. And I disagree a little bit with my my southern cousin from the North Shore. I think a debate such as this is actually important because it's all to do with appearance. So sure, the sums of money might not be that great in the scheme of things, but now more so than ever, it's very important how things look, and not least of which to our ratepayers when we're going out, with various propositions that are, expecting them to make some sort of sacrifice. So I think it at this time has been worthwhile. I think Councillor Coombe gave a very inspirational account of some people's approach to conferences and the benefit that comes of them. Almost attempted to try and sign up it myself on the basis of that, but I'm not a conference man. I've never been to one. My wife is, and is kind of a similar ilk as Councillor Coombe, so I appreciate that. I would just say, Mr Mayor, though, in terms of Jay, it might carry a little more conviction, I think, if we weren't sending 6 people ourselves. So I just would say that seems a little contradictory, notwithstanding the very good points that Councillor Stewart made about some of the local board representation, which I agree is a point that does need to be made. So I'm happy to go along with what's been put up, but I do agree with Councillor Simpson. You do have to be very careful, and I certainly, perhaps there's a little way to go on this. I know Councillor Hills gave the very good walking the talk example of himself there, where he's pitched into his own pocket for a conference, and who knows, maybe some of the attendees this time around will do something similar as a gesture. Councillor Coombe's always mentioned they're going in the recess break and using up the weekend. That's good. Maybe they might go a little bit further and write out a cheque too, to say that they're contributing as well. Who knows? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And finally, Councillor Shane Henderson.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sound so flippant earlier, but I have to say this debate is probably costing the ratepayer more than attendance at the conference itself. And can we not just get it through? I mean, Jay's all right. Let's just vote for it. Sweet.
Thanks. I'm just taking on board that last comment. You know, we should cut in half our meetings, but when somebody said something, don't say it again, and then we could save a lot of ratepayer money. Look, on a serious note, a lot has been said. Look, I acknowledge Councillor Desley Simpson. She's in charge of getting value for money. She's also chair of the Finance Committee, and she knows as well, if not better than most of us, the financial constraints on the council. But I'm going to support these recommendations because I think, as Councillor Dalton has said, these recommendations find a balance between the need to be careful with ratepayers' expenditure, but also the need to participate and to involve ourselves with our colleagues around the country. Is there a benefit in having a local government New Zealand? I think it's critical. You imagine the government dealing only with 67 separate local authorities and not having a voice for the concerns of local government that can be a unified and a stronger voice. And it is important that we have that voice. If I was to move a resolution that we disband local government New Zealand or cease to involve ourselves in it, I hope you'd all vote against that, because that would be indicating that, okay, it's all right for us, we're 1.7 million, but for all those other smaller councils, why would we want to provide any support for them? Why would we want to be collegial with them? Why would we want to collaborate with them to find some common ground? I think all of those things are absolutely critical. It's important that Auckland be seen to work alongside and in support of our colleagues, and it's important for us not to look like we're trying to dominate those colleagues. That's the fine line that we walk as a council, and it is really important that we just take the rare occasions that we have, and this is a once-a-year occasion, to actually mix and mingle and talk with and support the people that are facing similar problems, albeit on a different scale, to us around the country. I just think it would be an appalling look for us to say, we don't need local government New Zealand, we don't need to provide support to any other council, we'll go it alone. Well, we could go it alone, but what does that say for our collegiality with others? I am probably one of the most frugal mayors there is around the country. If you look at my budget for, whether it's on taxis or plane trips or international trips, and I'm not asking for support and sympathy for that. That's simply my approach. So I'm not one to advocate any extravagant expenditure or to support junkets. But this isn't a junket. And I want to acknowledge, and I'm looking particularly, I guess, at Deputy Mayor Cashmore and Pippacoombe and Richard Hills. I know how much time and effort they put into that. Really is. And that work, I know from feedback I get from others around the country, is respected. I meet on a regular basis by Zoom with other mayors, particularly from the metros, Christchurch, Hamilton and Wellington. And I also know that they value me attending. Another meeting for me is a pain in the arse. But I know they value because we can bring something to the table. We can provide the knowledge of our experience and the expertise we develop from the scale that we've got. That is really appreciated by those people. So it is important that we're part of this. It is equally important that we find the balance of not being extravagant with expenditure of funds. And I think these recommendations find that balance. So I'm going to put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no.
Against.
So would the councillors who have voted against wish to have their votes recorded?
Yes, please.
Okay, so Councillor Mulholland, Councillor
I'm a yes on A
Simpson.
to I and a no on J.
Yep, okay, and we've got Councillor Sayers, Councillor Stewart. Okay, thank you very much. We now move...
Sorry, Chair. Could I please have my vote recorded against J? Our local boards have already supported this, so...
Okay, that's fine. So there's two votes, I think, Councillor Newman, Councillor Hills against J. Right, we now come to item number 11, which has been referred by the Audit and Risk Committee on Auckland's Council's health, safety and wellbeing performance. And if I can invite Ian's already here at the table, I'll ask for a mover and a seconder. moved by Daniel Newman, seconded by Deputy Mayor Cashmore. I'll invite, this is a noting only paper, we have this regularly before us, so I'll ask Ian to speak to the paper and then we'll take questions. Ian, welcome.
Look, thank you, Your Worship. I'm here with Martin Griffiths from the Health, Safety and Wellbeing team. And look, I'll just be brief. The paper was written some weeks ago now, and I'll just run through an update of where we are on some of the sort of key items. So the mental wellbeing review, which is highlighted in the paper, the draft of that will go to our Chief Executive next Wednesday, and we're working through April to sort of finalise that, and the aim is to take that paper, it'll be public and it'll go to the Risk and Audit Committee in May, so that's on time. The ACC audit, which is highlighted, we actually passed that audit, so we are now continuing with our membership of the Accredited Employers Program. They did highlight a couple of issues which we needed to improve upon. One was around sort of working with our staff who have been injured at work, and in particular getting our people leaders to be in contact with those folk, and also some issues around worker participation and some of our health and safety operations, and both of those we're working on now. The report was written prior to level 3 COVID lockdown. We were just sort of highlighting at the time that we were prepared, and I think we were. We went through that lockdown pretty smoothly, both as an organisation but also as a wider council group, moving up to level 3 and then down through level 2. Just as an aside there, we are also developing up our programs with respect to vaccinations, COVID vaccinations. So the program obviously will be launched and promoted through the Ministry for Health, and we'll be working to ensure that our people are able to access those vaccinations. There's quite a bit of detail yet to go through, and to be honest, I haven't got a lot of that detail from the Ministry of Health here, but overall we'll be supportive clearly of our people obtaining those vaccinations. We've highlighted a number of incidents in the report, 5 altogether, that was such that we notified to WorkSafe. They've only picked up on one of those to investigate, and that's the sudden death that occurred towards the end of last year. Information was sought on that, and that was provided on time in early February, and now it's sitting with WorkSafe. So we as an organisation have met our requirements with respect to that. The other 4 incidents that we've highlighted have all been subject to internal investigation. So while WorkSafe did not pick up a formal investigation, we clearly have done that ourselves. And the last item I'll just run through is that the Risk and Audit Committee did make recommendations around the role of elected members, and in particular your roles as having a sort of a duty to ensure that this organisation is running in a good health and safety manner. And we're working with Phil Wilson, the Director of Democracy Services, to put those in place. It probably means a little change, particularly with respect to local boards. Local boards at the moment do receive reports, but they are largely the reports which you receive. And over time we'll be designing those around much more what they are the local governors for, and orientated around their districts. So that's an area that we need to improve upon. So look, I'll stop there, and if there's any questions, I hope we can answer them now.
Thank you very much, Ian and Martin, for being here. I think this is probably a topic on which we can run questions and comments together in terms of being an efficient use of time. So open to anyone that has any question or comment they'd like to make on the paper. It's pretty self-evident as it reads, but okay, if there are no... Councillor John Watson.
Yeah, thanks. Just a couple of questions. This Corporate Health, Safety and Wellbeing Committee, it has a union representative on it. Just remind me, what is the overall union membership of our organisation? What's the percentage?
So we have 2 unions working with members in our organisation, A1s, whose membership is largely found in recreation services, regional parks, cemeteries, and they would have perhaps 900 members or so. And the other major union is the PSA, and they would perhaps have, they're mainly concentrated in libraries and planning, resource consents, and generally elsewhere, but that would be where their major focus is, and they would perhaps have 1,500 to 2,000 members. I can get you the details. So overall, our workforce is not fully unionised at all.
Yeah.
And one of the areas that we're looking to improve upon is a more general worker representation, but we've started off with the unions.
Yes, okay, so I guess that's not unique to the council, but symptomatic of, declining unionship members over the last decade or so. And that kind of leads me on to my next question with respect of the review that the CEO has commissioned in terms of policies, processes and procedures. Often in a situation, and I think of a situation that apply to staff bullying or concerns there in terms of behaviours, one of the real needs in any organisation, in particular a big organisation, is one where people can feel confident going to someone to tell what's happening, and often there's a distrust of the organisation as such, and that there's not then that communication. So I know in terms of other big union memberships that like the PPTA, for instance, it's often the union that performs a kind of independent role in terms of having surveys, like health and wellbeing surveys that are independent, that are conducted independent of the organisation to their members. They sometimes do offer it beyond their own membership, but that has been successful in the past of highlighting issues within an organisation that people do not feel safe or trustworthy in going. In any of our review, is there any plan to bring an independent component to our policies, processes, in which people can then essentially go out of the organisation, even if it's to say, for argument's sake, the union, to have that sort of oversight that gives that kind of trust, and security for people then to come forward and feel safe to actually disclose what's going on.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. There's so look, that issue has been raised there's been quite an extensive discussion that's taken place with staff across the organisation, and that issue has been raised, and certainly we're looking at that as part of our approach. But it's not clear cut. We do have a number of speak up channels, and while there is concern from some staff that the element of trust is something that they're concerned about, in terms of its actual operation, it does seem to be working well. So there's a perception issue and perhaps an operational issue, but we are looking at the concept you've outlined.
So I'm glad to hear that, Mr. Mayor, because I think that's really important. I think any research shows that if there's not that vehicle for people coming forward, particularly in the economic circumstances we find it in a one-team employer for Auckland, where people's choices are really limited, that it's really important there's somewhere people can go to, and often, rightly or wrongly, it's not within the organisation itself, it's with some independent representation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kathy Casey.
Thanks, Ian. I'm interested in your 4 paragraphs about working from home. We've all had experience of it during COVID, and it's got its positives and its negatives, and you list some of those in your report. Can you tell me what the uptake is now of flexible working hours across the organisation? Is there a bigger uptake in some areas? And how are you mitigating the negative effects of working from home, which is the lack of connection and team spirit and so on?
So look, I suppose a very simple way to look at our workforce is we have a workforce that has to turn up to work. Our librarians and so forth, they have to be at work. So they are at work. They are at their normal place of work. Whereas we have perhaps a workplace such as that across the road here in Auckland House, where there's more of an opportunity to do something different. And so we are getting variation in terms of attendance at their normal place of work through the week. So it's probably lower on Fridays and Mondays and higher in the middle. I don't suppose that's a surprise, but nevertheless that is an issue. It's of concern to our organisation, and so we are working and will be working with, we've advised people we're looking to see them in that work at least 3 days a week. We're also looking at teams coming together as a whole team at least once a week. Many of our people managers have set up procedures where they're regularly in touch with people. They might be at home, but a call through the week or each day as to how things are going. So look, we are learning. We're definitely not the only organisation struggling, or not struggling, having this issue. It's something I think we're going to have to get used to. I think perhaps the nature of work has changed as a result of COVID, not just for us, but for many organisations. And our team leaders and training and development are going to have to pick that up. But look, there's active processes in place at each team level to deal with that issue. And as an organisation, we're looking to bring more people into the office than perhaps what they might otherwise have done. So 3 days a week.
Mr Chair, the implications for future provision of workspaces for staff, is that something that's on your radar now with regards to reducing the amount of space required?
Yes, that's been quite a big effort over the last actually 12 months or more. And you'll have seen we're concentrating within the CBD into a single building. So Graham Street and Bledisloe House will be vacated, and we'll be moving more of our people into Auckland House. And we're managing Auckland House in a manner where people can move in and out. I suppose hot desking is one of the sort of concepts associated with that. So look, there's some quite significant savings from a property perspective associated with that. And I think our staff are up for that.
Thank you very much. There's no further speakers, so I'll put the recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. Declare that carried. Thank you very much to Ian and Martin. Item number 12 is also referred from the Audit and Risk Committee, and this is a regular item as well, which is the Enterprise Risk Update. If I could ask Emma Mosley to come forward, and if I can ask Councillors Newman there and Deputy Mayor Cashmore to move and second it. Emma, if you'd like to speak to the paper. Again, I'll take questions and comments together on this item.
Kia ora. Thank you, Mr Chair and Mr Mayor. This is our standard information report for the quarter for the period December through to January 2021, referred from our Audit and Risk Committee. The quarter's update includes some update commentary on our top risk reset process, our Risk Champions program, our pandemic resurgence readiness arrangements, which were touched on by Ian Maxwell as well in terms of the health and safety issues in the previous item, and an update on AC36 risk management, which of course we've all experienced some very good outcomes in the last couple of weeks. The top risks are under constant review, and we are working with the executive leadership team and senior leadership on managing the top risks. The top risks profile this quarter remains stable, with 11 top risk areas that we are continuing to assess and evaluate the controls and mitigations in place. That work will be reported back to our executive leadership team on through audit and risk and to yourselves in May. The key risks that are emerging that I'll highlight this quarter and that are being addressed in the context of our top risks, and it's not included in the detail in the report itself, are the health and safety and wellbeing top risk, legislative change, which I know is on the radar for many of you, as well as our organisation as a whole, including Three Waters, Local Government Act and RMA reforms, which have the potential to have a significant impact on council. People and workforce risks, which are top of mind, and the fourth area is around resilience for future shocks and business continuity after the challenging previous 12 months that we've been through. So the work is on track to complete the top risk reset by May, and we'll be reporting that back through here following that work being completed. Happy to take any questions on the report itself or on top risks.
Thank you very much, Emma. So questions and comments together, if there's any. I think it's pretty straightforward. Councillor Richard Hills.
Thank you. And I tried to wave before, but I was a little bit too late. So I just want to say thank you for the to the Jim CEO for the wellbeing assessment that's happening. That's really, 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 really important, and I know will go far. On what we've got here, we've got good mention of climate change. Are we doing any risk assessment on things like ATAP and others that sit outside the council proper, I guess, and within the council family? Are we doing any of that work to sort of test the risk we could be putting ourselves into by decisions and operations of CCOs? It might be too specific, but you mentioned that we're collaborating on the climate risks, but I just want to know how broad we might be going.
Thank you. Through the Chair, a good question. Climate change is one of the top risk areas for Council, and it does have those two aspects to it. So there's the risks for the Auckland region, for New Zealand, that we're all responding to, and a lot of the work, Mahi, that's coming through your committee relating to TCFD and the setting of targets is critical to how we respond and then do our bit, if you like, in that space. So that work is linked to the top risk assessment that we do for climate change, which is under the umbrella of the top risk area of resilience. So yes, it is connected. Yes, you will see when the top risk comes through, those work streams feeding in appropriately where they relate to how we are responding and mitigating to the climate change risk. It's a bit of a puzzle, if I'm honest, but the useful thing, I think, from the organisation's perspective is when we come at this and look at it from a risk perspective, we can look at all facets and make sure that we've got a joined up picture of what we're doing and what levers we have, where we might have gaps and do more if we're needing to mitigate that particular top risk for the organisation. And it can be looked at in that context. So yes, we're working very closely with all those that are working at the coalface here, but trying to get the complete picture.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Bill Cashmore.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. You know, the independent members of the Audit and Risk Committee bring up virtually at every time these risk factors come up to it, how well are we canvassing as governors the risk profiles around council and how well is it understood? Do we have a measurement criteria for that, or is it just these sorts of updates to the governing body?
Thank you. Through the Chair, we don't have a measure as such. From a risk management perspective, I think that the risk rhythm that we have, the regularity that these issues are brought to the table, that we pause and think about them, that we have a mechanism to escalate and focus on things that might be changing or risks that might be eventuating, if you like, is very important. So the regular reporting is a critical part to that. But we do not have a measure, and we haven't measured how effective the engagement is, if that is where you're going to. We do, however, periodically run risk maturity surveys of how, which includes surveying of elected members and our governors, to test how our framework is operating and where we are on the maturity scale. We talk about being on a risk journey, and I believe we're moving along that and have moved in the last few years, and we have objectives to move further. But that is one way we do measure ourselves, and that's through the maturity survey.
Thank you very much. I was going to ask a facetious comment under AC 36 about the risk of the cup not being defended in Auckland. Having talked to Stephen Tyndall this morning. There are no other comments, so I'll put the recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no, carry. We come to item 13, which is a summary of GB information memoranda and briefing. Can I have somebody to move and second that, please? Councillor Simpson and Councillor Mulholland. There's not usually questions on this, so there is on this occasion. Councillor Coombe.
I just wanted to make a very quick comment that you've attached the submission to the Minister on the Waiheke Rahui, and I was able to report at that at the Hauraki Golf Forum, and it was very well received to hear that we had made that submission. So thank you for everybody around the table for your unanimous support for that submission.
Thank you. I'm meeting with Ngāti Paua tomorrow, I think. So I'll be raising, they'll no doubt be raising that with me as well, Councillor Coombe. Okay, I'll put the recommendation that we note progress on the Forward Work programme. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. Item number 14 is a summary of confidential decisions and related information that has been released. If I can ask the councillor to move that, Councillor Simpson, and seconded by Councillor Casey. Are there any questions or comments? If not, I'll put that the noting recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. Item number 15 is consideration of extraordinary business, and there has been no business item put forward. And item number 16 now is a procedural motion to exclude the public. This is to do with the recommendation from the Appointments and Performance Review Committee on the Chief Executive performance objectives and the update on workforce and full-time equivalent staffing. I'll ask somebody to move that in confidence, Councillor Fletcher, and seconded by Councillor Dalton. I'll therefore move that we go into public excluded. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. And I'll just ask anyone that ought not to be here, please, to leave the room and just give a minute or two for us to close down the system. While we're doing that, councillors, we've got one other item on the agenda. I'm going to make a presumption that you'd rather deal with this item